my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we are going to be doing another Monster Hunter creature. Now, a while back I did my very first one, which was Paolumu, and I'll leave a link down below if you haven't seen that one. But today we are actually going to be doing Nergigante. Now, this piece was so large and so detailed that I just had a ton of footage, and I decided to split it up into a two-part series. So today is the first half, and I'm going to show you guys how I did the clay pieces and did all the painting for them. And then tomorrow I'm going to show you guys how to do all the sewing for the body and then putting everything together. So anyways, let's get started. Okay guys, obviously since we're just going to work on the clay and the painting today, I'm going to be starting on the clay first. So the first bit of clay that I'm going to be working on is going to be the pair of horns. Now this guy's horns are absolutely massive, and since we're making them out of clay, we're going to have to do our best to try and make them as light as possible, or the face is just going to be way too heavy for it to stand up properly. So what I ended up doing was I took even amounts of tinfoil and I just started making some horn shapes out of them. So we're going for more of a bowl type horn. So it's going to be nice and thick at the base, and then it's just going to be kind of curved a little bit at the end. And then once I was happy with the shape of the tinfoil, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to cover this up with a thin layer of clay. So we're just going to go over the whole thing, cover it all up, and then smooth it out, and then we can start adding details to it. If you guys are curious on the type of glass that I'm building my horns on, these are just tiny little tea light holders. Okay, so we have everything completely covered, it's nice and smoothed out, and I'm going to start using my tools to add some detail to it. Now one cool detail that these horns have is they kind of have a nice twist to them. So we're going to have to try and twist our details around the horn as we're carving them in. And then the other horn is going to be a mirror image, so the twist is going to be going in opposite directions on each horn. So first I'm just going to kind of go around the base of the horn and start adding some divots and some texture and stuff to it to kind of match the details that are going to be on the face. And then once I get further up, I'm just going to be adding line work to it, and then of course, like I said, these are going to twist around the horn. And I'm going to make them different sizes. Some are going to be deeper than others, and others are just going to be nice little tiny scratches. So I just kind of messed around with adding a bunch of details, and once I was happy with how the horns looked, I'm going to end up baking them. So I'm going to bake them at 275 Fahrenheit for roughly about 45 to 55 minutes. Once they're out of the oven and have cooled, we can start on the face. Okay, so our horns are out of the oven and have cooled to touch, and now we're going to start working on the face. So just like our horns, we need to make a tinfoil base that we can start building up our face on. So I ended up making a rough shape of what I want, and what we're going to do is we're going to attach our horns to this. So I actually am going to use a little bit of hot glue to help hold this into place. Once it's done baking and everything, the glue is going to kind of melt and it's going to be useless, but right now while we're sculpting it, it's going to be necessary to have everything hold still. So I ended up taking a little bit of wire and I glued it into the base of the horns, and then I'm just going to glue the other half of that wire into the base of the head where I want the horns to be. So I'm going to get everything positioned and stuff, and then once I like how the horns look, we're going to start covering this face in clay. Okay, so I'm just going to take a bunch of strips of clay and start covering up my tinfoil face, and then I'm going to blend everything together. After I have everything covered, I'm going to use a little bit of line work to help mark out where I want the details. This is just going to help make everything nice and even and just kind of gives me a grid to follow. After that, we're going to start carving out where we want the details to go. So what we need to do is we need to make some holes where the eyes are going to go. The eyes are going to be a little bit caved in, and we don't want them popping out or anything. So we're going to make some nice big divots for that, and then we're also going to mark out where the mouth is going to open. Okay, I like the rough layout of what we have right now, so I'm going to start adding the detail. So the first bit of detail that I'm going to work on is going to be the eyes. So I'm going to end up taking some balls of clay and we're going to put them into the sockets for the eyes. We're going to make sure they're nice and positioned, and then we're going to start adding some clay strips around that to make the eyelids. So I'm going to start with the bottom eyelid, and then I'm going to add the top eyelid. Okay, so right now our head is kind of bulky and awkward to hold. I can't really put it on a glass container and let it rest while sculpting. I'm kind of having to hold it by the bottom jaw. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to end up working on the details on the top of the head and work my way downwards. That way I have something to hold on to, and then at the last minute we're going to end up sculpting the part that I'm holding on to. So right now we're just going to start on the top of the face and then work our way down. So I'm going to start adding some spiked scales to the very top, and we're going to start layering them until we get to the end, and we're just going to make them smaller and smaller as we get closer to the front of the face. So I'm just laying out the little scales right now, and then after I get everything placed, I'm going to go over everything with my tools to kind of straighten up the edges. After that, I'm going to start adding some scale texture to the rest of the top of the face, and then just keep moving downwards. Once we get to the end of the snout with the scales, we're going to start working on the nose. So I'm going to roll out a long strip of clay, and we're going to lay this where the nostrils are going to be, and we're going to start blending our clay in, just using our fingers to adjust it until we get the right shape. Once we're happy with how the nose looks, we're going to move on to adding teeth to the face. So I'm going to start with the front teeth, the little tiny ones, and then the big canines, and then we can move on to the side of the face and start adding teeth going down that. So similar to how we did the spiked scales on the very top of the head, what we're going to do is we're going to place all of our teeth, and then we're going to go over everything with our tools to kind of straighten everything up. So after we have the teeth done, the last bit of detail that we need to work on is just adding a little bit more scale work on the very top of the face, and then we're going to move to the bottom jaw and start adding some spikes to it. So we're just adding little lumps of clay where we want the spikes to go, and then we're blending it in, and then we'll probably add a bit of texture over this. Now since this is the bottom of the face, we don't need to add a ton of detail or anything, so you just need to add a bit of a texture, and it really doesn't matter if you add anything else. You want to go more detailed, you can, but the bottom of the face really doesn't get to be seen too much. Okay, so we're done with the face right now. I'm really happy with it, so I'm going to carefully put this in my oven, set the temp to 275, and let it bake for probably about 55 minutes, maybe a little longer since it's so large. Okay, so while our face is baking, we're going to start working on the feet. So I have wireframes set up for both the front and back feet. Now the front feet are going to have a larger wire frame for them because the claws for the front feet are a lot longer, and then the back feet are going to be a little bit smaller. So we're going to take a little bit of clay, we're going to make sure they're nice and even so we have the claws the same size on each foot, and we're going to start adding them to the tips of all the wires for the toes. We're going to shape them with our fingers and probably use our tools to kind of add a little bit of detail to them, and then once we have all of them positioned on the wire, we're going to actually bake them for probably about 20 minutes. So we already have the oven set for 275 Fahrenheit and we have our head baking, so we're just going to throw these in with the head for about 20 minutes and then we're going to pull them out. Once they've cooled, we can start working on the rest of the feet. Okay, so our claws are done baking, they're nice and cool, and we're going to start on the bottoms of the feet and then move to the tops. So I'm going to just take little strips of clay and we're going to start covering up all of our wires. We're going to get everything covered up, we're going to blend it together, and then we can start adding like balls of clay here and there if we want a thicker spot on our toes. Now most of these toes are really close together, so it's okay if they're kind of fused, but you don't want them to look like they're fused, so you will want to kind of divide them a little bit to make it look like they're still separate, but it's okay if they're just one solid bit of clay. This will actually make the foot a lot stronger. So we're going to do this to both the front and back feet. We're going to get the bottoms all done. I'm going to leave the surface nice and smooth because we're not going to add a bunch of detail to the bottoms of the feet. We're going to mainly focus our detail on the tops. So I'm going to put these in the oven again at 275 Fahrenheit for probably another 30 minutes this time. After that, once they're cooled again, we're going to start working on the tops of the feet. So what we're going to do is we're going to start adding clay to the very tops of all the toes and kind of do the same thing that we did to the bottom, except now we're going to start adding scale texture to it. So we're going to get everything covered, blended into the rest of the clay, and then we're going to start adding our line work to the tops to make scales. So I'm just going to go over the tops of all the toes, and then once we get to the base where all of the toes connect, we're going to make larger and kind of further apart lines. And then once you're done with the scales on the tops of the feet, if you want, you could add some texture to the sides of the feet just to blend everything together. Maybe poke a few little dots in it to make it look like there's tinier scales. And then we're going to put these in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for probably 45 minutes this time, just to make sure everything is completely baked. Okay, we're finally done making all of our clay pieces, and now we can start painting everything. So the first thing we need to do is we need to start primering everything. So the undertones of Nergigante's skin are actually kind of bright. They have a lot of orange colors and purples to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to start primering the face and feet these colors. So what we're going to do with the feet first is we're going to start with an orange color for the bottom, and then the sides are going to be kind of a bit more red, and then we're going to move to a darker red for the top, and just kind of make sure everything kind of blends together. So what we're going to do is we're going to let these reds and oranges on the feet dry, and then we're going to go over the tops of the feet where all the scale detail is with a nice black. And then after I'm done adding black to the tops of the feet, what I'm going to do is start primering the claws. So I'm not going to use a white or anything. I'm kind of going for kind of a muddy khaki color, and I'm just going to go over all of them. I might have to go over a few of them extra times just because I did bump them with darker colors. But once those are all dried, we can start adding more details to the feet. Okay, so for the details, what we're going to do is we're going to start making our claws look kind of like dirty and kind of scratchy. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of brush over the base of them with a black and just kind of muddy them up a bit. We don't want to completely cover it. We want it to kind of blend in and just kind of look a little bit dingy. And that's basically all the painting that I'm going to do for the feet. Now we're going to move on to painting the face. Now this is where it's going to get a lot of fun. So I'm going to start with the sides of the face. I'm going to go over that with a nice orange. And then as I go further up the face, I'm going to start adding red to it. I'm going to do the same thing to the bottom jaw, and then we're going to start blending all of this together. Now when I blended, I did lose a lot of the orange, and it just kind of looked like a nice orangey red, but I ended up liking it, so I didn't add more orange to it. So I'm going to let my oranges dry, and then I'm going to go over the very top of the face and some of the sides with a black. Now I had to go over this quite a bit to get the black to be really dark, so I am going to kind of fade to it being done because we're just painting black on black on black. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start fading that black into the horns. So we're going to kind of go further up the base of the horns, and we're going to use the same color that we used on the claws for the majority of the horns. And we are going to end up dirtying it up similar to how we did the claws. Right now I'm kind of just primering the horns with that khaki. I'm not going to go over them with the details until kind of closer to the end, mainly because the horns are kind of what I'm holding on to while painting the rest of the face, and I don't want to mess them up. Now the teeth, I am going to be using a white for this, but I am going to end up dingying it up a bit more. So it's going to be kind of a bit more grayish and kind of with black speckles once we're done. Now for this piece, I don't want anything super vibrant and just clean cut or anything. I want it to look dark and creepy and kind of like ominous. So everything that has a very vibrant color, we're going to kind of go over and just kind of dirty it up so it looks a bit more like natural and just kind of creepier. So we're kind of just going over everything with a nice black to kind of dirty it up and make it look darker. The only problem with this is I did go a little too dark, and I did have to adjust my colors and kind of brighten up a few more spots so the whole thing just didn't look black. So the sides of the face I ended up going over with more purples and stuff like that, and then I did brighten up certain spots on the horns as well. Once I was happy with the look of the scales and all the details of the face, I'm going to start on the eyes now. So the eyes are basically the last thing we're going to work on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a yellow, and I'm just going to kind of go over them over and over and over again until they're finally yellow. Since we're painting over black, it's going to take quite a bit. So you're just going to have to paint a layer, let it dry, paint another layer, let it dry until you finally have a yellow eye. And then once we're happy with the yellow, we're going to start painting around the edges of the eye with a red and start using our brushes to blend it into the yellow. This is going to help make the eye look kind of glowy and almost like fire. And then lastly, we need to add the pupil, so we're just going to add a little line of black in the eye and then kind of touch up around the scales of the face if you got any of the yellow or red on them. So that's basically all the painting that I'm going to do. I'm really happy with how this looks, so I'm going to let my paint dry for a little bit, and then I'm going to go over everything with a nice layer of resin. And then the resin's going to have to cure overnight. Okay guys, and that's how I made the clay pieces and did all the painting for Nergigante. Tomorrow we're going to end up doing all the sewing and putting it together, so keep an eye out for that video. Should be posted roughly around the same time I always post, which is kind of around noonish, depending on where you're at. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!